So Rohit, thanks so much for joining us. Not the first time you've graced our presence. Always excited to hear what it is that you have to say. I believe today we're going to be talking about some big mega trends that you've been thinking about. I'm sure that your thinking has been influenced very rapidly by a lot of the things that are transpiring right now, perhaps accelerating or decelerating some of your thinking around these macro trends. But nonetheless, this session is scheduled to be about 30 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. So welcome, everyone. I am going to talk about some trends today, and some of you may know me before, but for those of you who don't, I am a former agency guy. I spent 10 years working at Leo Burnett and Ogilvy before branching out on my own to start doing more kind of research and writing and speaking. Used to be at live events, now it's more virtual speaking. And I published a book just about 2 months ago that was all about trends in the world, which seems like probably a pretty bad timing move on my part, considering you publish a book and now the big question is, well, this was all before the virus, so does any of this stuff still, is it relevant? And so many things have changed. And so a big part of what I talk about now and what I wanted to share with you is, what do we do now to manage the change? What do we do to get ready for this new reality? And what are some trends that perhaps might still be relevant, but relevant in a different way? So let me share my screen now so that I can share with you some of these thoughts and insights. And what I thought I'd do first of all is just kind of mention that I spend a lot of time now thinking about the disruption, right? The moment that we're in and why it's so different and how our behaviors change, right? So I mean, yeah, probably we're spending a little bit more time than we used to streaming entertainment and trying to find solace in some of that. And I think that the more time we spend online, either looking at entertainment or on videos like this, we are shifting the way that we used to interact and trying to do something a little bit different, but hasn't changed the reality of what makes us successful or not successful, and in particular, what makes retailers successful or not successful. And one of the big things I talk about a lot in every talk is who wins, right? Even in a disrupted world, like who's going to win? Who's going to be the one that stands out? The retailers that stand out, the brands, the agencies that stand out. And to me, it's the people who understand people. Like, what do we need right now? And how has what we need shifted? And who's going to be able to react to that? So I want to share a couple of ideas for how the world has shifted, maybe faster even now than it was shifting before. But I mean, look, 6 months ago, we were talking about disruption, right? We were talking about innovation. We had chief innovation officers. It's not like the world was exactly the same, but things have been moving faster now. And for some people and some companies, there's an upside to that because there's more adoption of what they have been talking about for a long time. And for others, it's big problems and shut stores and all sorts of things. So let's talk about the change. And basically what I'm going to share with you in the next couple minutes that we have together is 3 big ways that the world has shifted. And then I'm going to talk about 3 trends. And at the end, I want to give you a link to get a resource for free that I think will help you, your colleagues, your clients, and all of us kind of manage this new world that we're in. So that'll be at the end, a little secret surprise, just to foreshadow and keep you engaged, hopefully until the end. But let's talk about some of the ways that our world has changed. And one of the big things that I have seen, and I think many of us have seen, is that the way we buy stuff has been totally changing, right? I mean, we used to strap a mattress to our roof and take it home, and now we don't need to do that anymore. We can order it and get it delivered. There's all sorts of different retail experiences that were coming out that were shifting our perception of what, in this case, looks like candy or popsicles, but was actually bath soap. The sorts of products that we're buying are totally shifting. There's a food sniffer where you can hover it over food to tell if it's gone bad or not. Maybe perhaps even more useful today because we're keeping food in our houses and we can't go out to restaurants the way we used to. the June Intelligent Oven, which was an oven where you put the food in and the cameras inside tell you how long to cook it for. That's adulting right there. That's helping people figure out how to cook when they don't know how to cook, right? And this was the innovation that we saw, the way that we were consuming stuff, even the way that we were waiting for things, right? Like there's whiskey aged as little as 2 days, because who's going to wait for 20 years for this whiskey anymore? Like we need it right now, or at least we think we do. And so we try for that, right? There was a platform in San Francisco where you could order a fuel truck to deliver fuel to your parked vehicle. So now you don't have to get out, you don't have to interact with anyone, and so all of this disruption was changing the way that we were used to buying. Right? So that was the first big shift. Second big shift was that technology was connecting us, but also isolating us. And so we had these beautiful moments where all of a sudden you can keep in contact with people. And now through Zoom, like we can see each other and see people that maybe we weren't used to seeing before. But at the same time, like we're totally disconnected. And now we're physically disconnected, right? Because we can't go out the way we used to go out. But there's platforms like Care Coach, which had avatars for elderly people to socially interact with one another, but socially interact with a friend, a digital avatar as a friend, because the isolation that some people feel of not having the family around is a big deal. And that's going to become even more relevant today, right? That need for technology to be more connective for us. There's extreme versions, right? This is a guy who's disturbingly happy with his holographic wife, which is a real product that's been out for a couple of years out of a company in Japan. And again, it's companionship, right? It's managing that isolation. It's trying to get people outside of what they're used to doing. I mean, there's even art exhibits, extreme art exhibits like this one, the focus tube, right, where people are looking at each other because like we want that concentrated moment of having human connection. Like that's what we're seeking. That's what we're looking for. Really interesting. And the third big shift that I've been watching, this is something that I've been talking about for probably 10 years, I would say, is this believability crisis that we're in. And look, I mean, as a longtime marketer, like I think that our industry probably has to take a little bit of the blame here because we've done stuff like this for a long, long time, right? More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. So it must be good for you, right? Or all the beauty advertising that doesn't make you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel worse. Here was a real ad that Levi's used saying hotness comes in all shapes and sizes. And it shows you like 4 women who are kind of the same size. So I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that. Like, what is hotness? How do we define that? What does it mean to be hot? I mean, all of these breakfast cereals had these same claims, these unbelievable claims that boosts your immunity. How could that be possible, right? There's no all natural product that you could plant in a farm that grows Cocoa Krispies, right? It doesn't exist. But we see this stuff and we wonder, like, what does it mean? Now, it's not only marketing that causes this believability crisis. It's also the idea of media and unbelievable media. And we're seeing a lot of that right now, right? Miracle cures, all of these things that are meant to either manipulate us or make us feel worse about ourselves. I mean, they're not positive things that are going out in the world. They're not positive moments. And so we don't believe any of it. This is just a few of the books that have been written recently, all about why we don't believe anything, right? We don't have hope anymore. We are in a post-truth world. We don't know what the truth is. So the big question that all of this is raising, and I think what it's led us to is, well, we know there's noise. We see, we hear, we feel the noise, but we don't always know how to navigate it. And making the noise even worse are these devices that put them front and center for us. And if you've suffered over the last several weeks, or maybe even before that, with this constant feeling that you got to scroll, you got to like look at the next story, you always have to see it. We're not doing something positive to ourselves, to our lives by doing that, right? Because if you sit there and you try and speed read, I mean, it's like this app, the Spritz app, where when you're speed reading by flashing words in front of yourself as fast as possible, like, yeah, you can improve your reading speed, but you're also going to probably give yourself a humongous headache over time. Because the truth is, you can't get smarter by trying to consume everything. It doesn't work. It's not a positive way to do it. In fact, if you tried to do that, like imagine if you did that with food. if you tried to fill your hunger by eating as much as possible in a single moment, like it would be like these hot dog eating competitions that we have in America, which are like the craziest things why anyone would do that, right? But at the end of that, if you were to participate in something like that, like, yeah, you probably wouldn't be hungry, but you definitely wouldn't feel good. And I think that we can't do that with information either. It's not a positive way to do it. Instead, what I love to try and help people do is figure out how to be what Isaac Asimov called a speed understander. Not a speed reader, but a speed understander. Now, what does a speed understander do? A speed understander pays attention to only what's most important. A speed understander looks at the connections between stories and tries to find the commonalities between them. For the last 10 years, I've tried to do that in a very specific way. So every year, I've published a new version of my non-obvious trend report, which many of you would be familiar with. And the non-obvious trend report has highlighted some big trends that have been taking place over the coming year. So every year there's a new version of this report, and you'll see them across the top. There's a new annual edition, and it comes out usually in print. Since 2015, it's been in print. And the latest version of that, non-obvious megatrends, is the one that just came out 2 months ago. And in non-obvious megatrends, I talk about the big macro trends that are changing our culture. And so, of course, the big question right now is, well, how did they stand up when the whole coronavirus thing hit? Are they still relevant? Have they changed? And we're going to talk about that. But I think in order to talk about that, I have to take you inside the mindset of being able to even see these in the first place, very quickly. So I'm not going to take a lot of time. I mean, I do teach a class at Georgetown University occasionally. So I'm an occasional professor, but I'm not going to get too academic with you right now. I just want to take you inside the mindset of these, because the way that I've been thinking about trends and the way that I've been curating stories and becoming what I call a trend curator, I think is valuable for all of us right now, because it'll help you to navigate the noise. So I want to take you inside that. And I also want to share with you a little bit more about the line of books that you see at the bottom, which are our non-obvious guides. So I'll tell you a little bit more about those in a second. But I want to share with you the mindsets, the 5 mindsets of what I call non-obvious thinkers. And the 5 mindsets of non-obvious thinkers are: be observant, see the details that nobody else sees, be curious, always ask why, be fickle, learn to move on, save an idea and move on, be thoughtful, take time to think, and be elegant. Use words carefully, choose words carefully. So those are the 5 principles. I will be happy to, at the end of this talk, I'll give you my email address. If you shoot me an email, I'll be happy to share with you all of these slides. So maybe you're screen grabbing, maybe you're not, but you don't have to. I'll be happy to share all the slides with you afterwards. Just shoot me an email. I'll send you my email address. You can get in touch with me directly. So super easy. You don't have to do all of that if you don't want. But let me take you inside what this process looks like very quickly, and then I'm going to give you the 3 trends, the 3 big mega trends that I believe are changing the world of retail right now and that matter most for anybody who's either a retailer or working with retailers. So that's our agenda for the rest of the day. Stay with me, just a couple minutes left. We're rocking through this super fast. So hopefully your attention has not wandered too far. I know it's tough. But stay with me. So let's talk about what this process looks like. Let's have a look at it. So these are just a couple of the books on my bookshelf here at home. And I don't just have the books that you see behind me. I mean, if you kind of look at the side here like that, those are my entire crazy bookshelf. So that's hopefully you got like a super fast look at that. So I've got a lot of books. And when I read these books, I'm always using these colored tabs to save interesting ideas. Because to me, the interesting ideas pop out at me, but if I open that same book 6 months from now, I'm not going to see them. So I try and make sure that I find a way to highlight them for myself. So this is how I save them in the books that I watch. And these are some of the magazines that I spend time trying to read. And they're not constant, so I don't read these every month. What I do with magazines is a very important part of my process, which is I pick up magazines for subjects that I don't care about and that I'm not interested in. I pick up magazines that are targeted clearly to people who aren't like me, moms of young toddlers, right? And I'm neither a mom and my kids are not toddlers. But I will pick up all of these different magazines because it gives me a chance to step into somebody else's world and empathize with someone who's not like me. And in a world where we can just set our preferences and have social media serve up the same stories that we already agree with over and over again, we're in this dangerous moment, the first time in human history, where we can become more well-read and more narrow-minded at the same time. Because you just keep reading the same thing that makes you reinforce what you already think. And what ends up happening is you believe anyone who doesn't think like you must be an idiot. And that's not good. That's not the way that we should want to live, right? Because the truth is, I mean, maybe some people are idiots, right? That's undeniable. There are definitely idiots. But not everybody who disagrees with you is an idiot, right? We can logically agree on that. So how do you empathize with those people who come from a different place than you are? They come from a different culture, a different background. Magazines are one way that I find that really helps me do it. So that's a method that I use. When I start to collect all these stories, when I start to collect all this information, this is what it looks like visually mapped out for me. So what you're looking at is categorizations of stories that are grouped together based on themes that I then use for the research that goes into the book. And I'm going to show you in just a second what a time-lapse video of this whole process looks like. So in 30 seconds, I'm going to show you exactly what that process looks like. But ultimately, what it ends up developing are these trends. What you're looking at here are just a couple of the past trends from previous trend reports. And all of these trends are spotlighted in the book, Non-Obvious Megatrends. You can pick that up either at like delivery from bookstores, which a lot of bookstores are still doing right now, or you can pick it up online, or you can go to nonobvious.com/megatrends and you can learn about all of the trends, and there's a whole appendix of all of them. So if you care about seeing kind of every trend, you can do that, and I'll give you those links at the end of the presentation as well. But these are just a couple of the past trend predictions that have been part of the report. And I promised you the time-lapse video. So let's take a look at that, right? So this is what the actual video looks like, where what you're seeing is grouping together of stories. So essentially, all of these different stories come from magazines. They come from places where they're written down, and they're being grouped together based on the theme of what they all represent. And now each one of these themes are then being elevated to a bigger idea. And in this case, the bigger idea was a trend that I called truthing. And truthing was the idea that we tend to internalize and go back to what we already know to figure out what we believe the truth to be. Then there's an outline, and the outline turns into a chapter in the book. In this case, it was a chapter in the 2018 version of Non-Obvious. So that's what the process looks like. And I remember a team of journalists came and we were collaborating together. They were doing a story about this whole process, which I call, by the way, my haystack method. And I call it the haystack method because I spend a lot of time putting the hay together, and then I stick the needle in the middle of it. And that's what the trend is. And so that's what I call the haystack method. And they wanted to visually depict that haystack method. And they had this really unique idea for a photo shoot. And I went along with it because I thought it sounded really cool. And this is what we ended up with. This was a photo from that photo shoot. And this is not photoshopped. This is me actually wearing all of these Post-it notes. And the funny thing about it was that not only the process of doing it, which is on my Instagram feed, it's one of the past videos where you can see the whole thing being put together. But the funny thing about it was that it was this perfect representation of what we all struggle with right now, which is just we're surrounded by stuff, right? We're surrounded by ideas that are represented by all these Post-it notes, and we gotta find a way to sift through that to figure out what the signal is, right? What's the signal in between all this noise, and what should we be paying attention to so we can get ready for the future? That's what we gotta try and figure out. So the whole process of this leads us to these trends. And every year in the past, I've had 15 trends. The Non-Obvious Megatrends book has 10 specific megatrends. But because we only have a limited amount of time together, I'm just going to share 3 top line ones that I think matter most for retail. And for each one of them, what I want to give you is not just the trend, but also a stealable idea for what to do about it right now. So whether you're a retailer or whether you're an agency or a collaborator or a partner helping retail, hopefully these ideas will be useful for you to try and sort of weather this storm right now and get past it and do something to feel like you're still moving forward, even though in so many ways we've had to move backwards. So the trends that you'll see, the definition of the trend, my definition of a non-obvious megatrend, is a unique curated observation of the accelerating present. Curated observation of the accelerating present. That's what I'm trying to share, and that's what I'm trying to look at and find. So the first big megatrend is something that I call instant knowledge. And instant knowledge is the idea that now we have access to so much information at our fingertips that we feel like we know exactly what we need to know and we don't need any more. And there's a positive side and a negative side to that, as you'll find with many of these megatrends. They're not inherently good or bad. It depends on how they're used. And instant knowledge, the upside of that is that we can learn anything faster. We can learn anything right away. The downside is that we might feel like we have expertise when we actually don't. We might be overconfident. So let's take a look at some stories, right? So here's one of the stories I found talking about this idea of instant knowledge. It was the story of an 8-year-old that drove to McDonald's because he had the munchies and he wanted to get a burger. And when the police came, because the store workers called the police after they realized that they weren't being pranked, and here we are on April 1st, so you might think it's a prank, right? But the police were called, and when they came and interviewed the boy, he said, I was hungry and I taught myself how to drive on YouTube. So here we are. We're in a world where an 8-year-old teaches himself how to drive on YouTube because he wants a burger. And 10 years from now, after living through this whole virus scare and after going through distance learning or whatever he's doing right now, that same 8-year-old, what is that 8-year-old going to do when a college question comes up? Does that kid need college? Will he want to go to college? Is college even going to be in a place that it usually is? We don't know. What we do know, though, is that the behavior of people, right? That's what I try and pay attention to with these megatrends, the behavior that is starting to become more commonplace. And the behavior that this kid has grown up with is, I have a question, I need knowledge, I can go online and I can figure it out. And this idea of figure it out is central now to so many different cultures, so many different people, and an entire generation that's growing up saying, there's amazing content that I can learn from directly. All I have to do is click a button. And that's instant knowledge. So now we can answer this all-important question that perhaps has become even more important now when we can't get the food that we're used to getting from all of the restaurants we're used to going to, depending on where you live. What are we going to have for dinner? That's the big question, right? How do we gain that knowledge? So the big shift here is that we no longer say, oh, I'm not good at that. I don't know about that, right? And more people are starting to say, even whether you have, like, if you studied mindsets and Carol Dweck's work, like fixed mindsets versus growth mindsets, like even if you had a fixed mindset, you're still starting to see that, look, I have access to this stuff. And I may not think of myself as an expert, but at least I can figure stuff out. And so I mentioned that I would come back to the non-obvious guides. And this has been a big initiative that my entire team has started. And I have a publishing company called Idea Press. And so we've been working on this, these guide series. And the whole idea is that the dummies guides and the idiots guides that used to be out for a long time, like, they're written for a different generation. They're 400 pages long. They're basically like dictionaries, and they're for dummies and idiots. And I don't know about you, but I don't think of myself as a dummy or an idiot. I'm a smart guy. I just don't know about everything. And so these guides are smart advice for smart people. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a way to get access to a bunch of the guides, and in particular, the latest one, which I think will be super relevant for you right now. So I promised you, though, with every one of these trends to give you an actionable tip. And here, the actionable tip is, in this moment where we don't know where to focus, what if you started to spend more time focusing on helping people get smarter faster? Because the expertise is still something that you hold, or that your employees hold. And so the question is, how do you share that expertise, right? I read a story about a haircut place that can no longer give haircuts, but now they're coaching people to do their own haircuts. So that's expertise, right? You may not be able to be there to cut the hair, but you can give people expertise on how to start to do that themselves. Because at the end of the day, people don't want to do that. And oh, by the way, I should say, I'm not advocating teaching people to cut their own hair. That's probably a bad idea. What I mean is teach someone how to cut someone else in their family's hair. That's probably a better idea, just to be clear, right? But share the expertise. Help your audience get smarter faster in this moment when you can't do the other things that you're used to doing. All right, second big trend, flux commerce. The way that we buy and the lines that used to exist between industries are starting to blur and have been blurring for some time, right? So Apple doesn't just make devices anymore. They created the credit card. Capital One and many other banks, they're not just banks, they're also coffee shops, right? They were opening all of these things. And I get that some of these images feel very dated now when we don't have access to these things. But I thought they were still relevant to include and to share here because it shows how those lines are blurring. Crayola, the line between makeup and crayons, right? Because makeup is basically painting your face, right? It totally makes sense. Taco Bell opened a hotel. All of these are examples of disruption, right? And the idea of disruption is, can we proactively break down these walls that used to exist between industries and not say, oh, that's not our industry? One of the things that I've found year after year working in innovation roles, either inside of an agency where you're recommending things for a brand to do, or even now being a small business owner and inspiring people from the stage to do things differently, is there's a reluctance, right? Because when someone's doing something that's working, it's risky to change. But right now, the things that used to work aren't the things that we can rely on. And the upside of that is, I think many of us will find that the people who used to be very opposed to the big innovative ideas are now more likely to say yes, because they need it. And maybe it's a little bit of desperation, but desperation can lead to really innovative experiments, really cool things that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. So there's an opportunity there that I think we can take advantage of. All right, the last trend that I want to share with you, the last big mega trend, is something I call revivalism. And revivalism was a trend that I wrote about to talk about how we're starting to turn time back a little bit. You know, we were feeling too connected to our devices. We were feeling too overwhelmed by technology. And so we started to go more analog, right? People started listening to music on vinyl. Kodak brought back film, like actual, like film in cameras, because there were some diehard photographers that wanted to use film. All of these shows are coming back, like Picard is back, which I'm super excited about because I loved him in that role. I loved Sir Patrick Stewart in the role of Jean-Luc Picard, and he's coming back. They're even bringing back things that shouldn't come back, right? He-Man, which I used to watch when I was a kid, wasn't very good back then, and they're bringing that back too. So they're bringing back all sorts of different things, right? We're playing board games again. These classic retro games are coming back. I even read a story about how they were teaching typewriting to some kids in Pennsylvania recently. The idea behind all of these is, in a moment when we aren't sure what to do, we start to go back to comfort. We start to rediscover the analog. And that's an opportunity as well, because what's the analog version of what you have, of what you're doing? How could you help people to reconnect with that and build trust as a result of that? That's really interesting. So the final thought I want to share with you is this quote, which I shared earlier from Isaac Asimov. Don't be a speed reader, be a speed understander. See the connections, learn to adapt to the world now. Think about the trends, think about the macro ideas, be more open-minded, be what I call a non-obvious thinker. The last thing I want to share with you is 2 ways to help you do that. The first is, every Thursday morning, I publish an email newsletter. And the email shares the most interesting stories of the week. So if you enjoyed any of these stories that I just shared, or if you just want an inside look at maybe the stories that not everybody's talking about, this email will be your way to get that. You can go to that link down at the bottom, subscribe, and you'll get that email in your inbox every Thursday. You'll also get access to this brand new guide that I've been working with more than 20 other contributors to pull together, which is everything you need to know to be more effective at being a virtual worker, because that's what we all have to do right now, or many of us have to do right now. Work remotely, do virtual meetings, and we make a lot of mistakes when we do that. And to be honest, we don't really know how to do it all that well. There's a lot of advice on blog posts and various places out there, but in mid-April, this book will come out, this guide, and it will give you everything that you could possibly need to know, and it will be totally free. So if you want an advanced look at that, also sign up to my email newsletter and you'll get an advanced look at that. And finally, I'll give you my email address so you can connect with me personally. I hope that we do get to connect, and I really look forward to it. Thank you for spending some time with me. Thank you to the team at PSFK for pulling this together. Love you guys, and I hope that this was useful.